Welcome to the Wrestling Inc. interview with former two-time NWA World's Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis. I'm Paul Pratt, aka Point Almar. Welcome to the interview, Nick.
Thank you very much. Good to talk to you.
So, it's already been talked about so much, but as someone who actually was there at NWA Empower and NWA 73, the environment there in St. Louis, the feeling was so special. Like from whether that was the response from the fans to the feeling behind the scenes with the talent, knowing that it was such an important night for NWA for its return to St. Louis and the Coruscant. Talk to us a little bit more about how important that weekend really was to establishing NWA the way it's envisioned for its future.
Well, one of the things that I've enjoyed in my time with the NWA is being able to sort of breathe new life into things that have a tremendous amount of history attached to them and tradition, but had not been sort of celebrated in that respect. They were sort of always things that people talked about in the past tense. And for me, I always thought that was a tremendous opportunity that was being missed. Because when you look at sports, it's very, very hard for a new sort of tournament or championship or prize or concept to really break through, because one of the things that links fans to the competitors to the whole genre, I suppose, is just the history, right? It's the sort of it's this thing that, like Wimbledon or the Super Bowl or whatever it may be, the Olympics. It's like it's this thing that can be traced back, any number of years or decades or centuries, where people can sort of go, yeah, this is the prize. This is the sort of representation of the profession. So with the NWA, obviously the first piece of business was the championship, but then things like the Crockett Cup came along, and all these other opportunities to sort of reintroduce and breathe new life into these things, and wrestling at the Chase was one of those things. So I really liked the fact that the return of wrestling at the Chase was a return, to a sort of traditional wrestling venue, but we also used it as a vehicle to then do something that the NWA had not done before. So it was this great sort of marriage of celebrating tradition and also bringing something brand new and showing that those two things don't have to be exclusive of one another. They can work together. So in this case, an all women's pay-per-view, with some very progressive additions. So and there was no, it didn't feel like there was any conflict between those two things. So for me, I thought that was really cool, and I thought it was a real testament to everybody involved how they were able to pull that off. Because often in wrestling, there seems to be this kind of almost addiction to new, like new. We got to do something new, something different, something. And in many ways, sometimes I think that often we lose fans by not acknowledging the history and traditions of the business. So to me, I always felt like that was the right lane for the NWA, but that's just me. So to answer your question, I loved the atmosphere because it was, there was a small group of us, Mickey included, that we were exhausted before we even got there, just when everybody else is getting there and they're all, even like yourself, people who were involved in the event are getting there and they're like full of energy because they're fine. Oh, let's go. There was some of us who were already like running on fumes, but that's kind of the dynamic that makes it fun, because we then rely on everybody else to sort of keep us going. It's kind of like, hey, we've carried the baton to here. Now we need you guys to sort of help us over the finish line, and we're all going to do this together. And that's that's really always been one of the things that stands out about the NWA. Whenever somebody new comes, there were a lot of new faces there. There's a lot of new faces pretty much every time there's a taping. One of the things that comes through most often is people say, "Wow, the atmosphere was so great. You know, what a great atmosphere. What a great working environment." And look, it's a tough business. It's a very difficult business to have success in. So if you're not having fun, like while you're doing it, it will beat you down, very, very quickly. So that's as important to me. And I think you'll see that, you see that from a lot of guys who have been at WWE, where they sort of go, I thought I'd lost the ability to enjoy this because of the pressure. And usually it's a real balancing act. But I think that truthfully, the best way to succeed in this business is to not let it chew you up and spit you out. And so it's up to you to sort of determine that balance of how much you're going to dedicate to this and how much pressure you're going to allow yourself to have, but also to remember to enjoy what you're doing, because if you enjoy it, the audience enjoys it. If you believe in what you're doing, the audience believes in what you're doing.
This isn't on my little run sheet of questions, but you mentioned something that has been a lifelong love of mine, and that was the Crockett Cup. And when we were in St. Louis, I was telling Billy, like, as a kid, my other people dreamed of growing up and becoming a wrestler. My dream was to grow up and manage a tag team in the Crockett Cup. So with the springtime, it's usually in the springtime. Is that something that is in the works, or will that be in the works, do we think? As far as I'm aware, it's very much like sort of penciled in. I'd have to go back and check, but I believe that the plan is for the Crockett Cup this year to be in Nashville. Amazing.
So, that might be you might have a scoop there, Paul. I don't think anyone's announced that yet, but I believe that's the plan.
Oh my gosh, fingers crossed, Billy, do it. Now, you mentioned, we talked about St. Louis. We just talked about the possibility of going to Nashville for y'all. The recent pay-per-view you did in Kentucky led to two of the most compelling episodes of Power in my recent memory. That show was so strong. What came out of it was so solid. And I wanted you to talk about the energy there and how this seeming like we are moving away from Atlanta on periodic occasions to seemingly invigorate fan interaction with NWA. And talk to me about that.
Well, I worked for TNA for 6 years. I came in really almost at its peak. So I was there in the sort of peak Universal years. There's no doubt that from a lifestyle perspective, it's really nice to be in the same place all the time.
Yes,
but it's not conducive to a dynamic and exciting sort of fan interaction. And while Atlanta has been tremendous for the launch of the show, and one of the things that I thought really stood out about particularly the first couple of seasons was the fact that even though it was a studio, that the audience was still really loud and boisterous and interactive. You never want to outstay your welcome, and truthfully, when there are so many sort of hidden gems almost, and when it looks like, and again, this is just my sort of entrepreneurial observations, but when it looks like WWE's sort of strategy going forward is to focus less on smaller shows in smaller markets and put all their eggs in one basket for big stadium shows in major markets, that's exciting to other organizations in the market, because it means that there are these smaller markets that can be tapped and with enthusiastic and grateful fans. And in my experience, often when you go to places that aren't receiving all of the big shows and don't have a major sports franchise or don't have a lot of the big touring acts going through, often you get incredibly responsive fans because of the gratitude they have, for entertainment being brought to them. And I think that that's a currency that the NWA should be trading with a lot, is that sort of that appreciation, that mutual kind of appreciation thing. Like, anytime any wrestling company that isn't WWE or AEW really needs to operate in a way that is very, very fan oriented, and I know that seems like a very obvious thing to say, but what I mean is, like, it really needs to be like customer service needs to be like the in my opinion needs to be sort of the number one priority. You have to really go above and beyond to create messaging that sort of shows people like, hey, when you buy a ticket to come to this event, you're going to have a great time, and we're going to have a great time with you, and we appreciate it. And I think I think we saw that in Kentucky, and I hope that sort of trend continues, because ultimately, again, smaller companies can't compete with WWE and AEW for production value. But
absolutely,
for me, as the thing that drew me into wrestling as a kid was this backdrop of people going nuts and being completely emotionally invested in what was happening. That was the part that was compelling to me. It wasn't like, wow, look at these LED screens. It was like, wow, this guy's talking and he's got these people in the palm of his hand, and they're just and they're so they know all these catchphrases, they know all the words, they know all these moves, and they're so emotionally invested. Like, I want that. And anyone can do that. You just got to roll up your sleeves and get to work.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like you mentioned excuse me, you mentioned the LED screens. Sometimes I feel like that is a distraction. You know what I mean? It's like it's a sensory overload, and I would much rather really focus my attention on the stories that are being told in the ring, and my emotional investment in that.
Yeah, I agree, and again, I don't want this to seem like a sort of WWE bashing, because they're the market leader, and had they not been around, I may not have in the industry myself. But it's the same as in any business. Growth can lead to sort of critical mass, but it also creates opportunities for smaller companies to be able to capitalize on the things that are now of less importance to the big companies. And if one of those things is the sort of the overall kind of attention to detail with the customer experience, then I think that's a smart play.
So after more than 1,000 days with the 10 pounds of gold as the real world's champion, we now have a new world's champion in the NWA, Trevor Murdoch. And it appears that you have stepped out of the chase for that title, at least for the moment. For now. Yeah. And I wanted you to kind of talk to us about the thought process going, behind that, because I think for many people, the expectation was that, okay, Nick Aldis is right back in the run.
I think for me, I think I've proven that I can sort of pretty much insert myself back into that mix anytime I want. But from a business point of view, as far as the organization is concerned, I was able to sort of make use of that resource and that asset to build my market value, and therefore, theoretically increase the value of anything I'm doing with or without the championship.
Of course.
So for me, it's kind of like I pretty much said to them, you need to let some fresh blood try to prove themselves to be worthy of that of the belt. It's going to be really hard for them to do that if they're always sharing that oxygen with me. just because the association is so strong at the moment that that people are always going to be keeping one eye on me. And I didn't want that for Trevor, and I don't want that for anyone who steps up. And that's really what it's all about, including Trevor. Like, I did everything I could to sort of tee this thing up. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So now it's up to him to hit the ball. And there's a spot, there are spots open up now for other people, but it's not a case of Billy just sort of selecting someone, right? And just saying, okay, this guy. Like, it don't work like that. A lot of people try to make it that way, but it's not the ball game. It's up to the handful of people that I think probably could have a shot at it, to now be consistent and prove themselves to be like capable of carrying a main event and carrying the brand. And that means doing more than just showing up at TVs, and sort of saying, hey, what am I doing? Right. It takes more than that. It takes, like, I taught myself how to edit and produce video packages. I've always worked very hard on branding, my own branding. Like, everything that you've seen me do during my time with the NWA, like, it's about Strictly Business, the National Treasure, my look, my outfit, the whole thing. It's all me. I did all of it. There wasn't a team of people that said, hey, this is now your thing. That was all that all came from me, and it was all stuff that I invested my time. So anyone who's looking to try to sort of achieve the same things with the NWA needs to put in the same amount of commitment. So time will tell whether anyone will, but I'm sort of at this point where I'm like, I'm opening the door. You know what I mean? Like, I am rolling out the carpet for you guys, like someone. Because for me, it makes more sense. Like, I hope that there is someone else there, because I need people to wrestle too. But it's up to them, because wrestlers can be their own worst enemy, Paul. They get these. They love to make these sort of long-winded posts, and they love to sort of have a persecution complex and sort of play the victim and say about all these things that they would have if it were just for this, an opportunity that. But when it comes down to, like, rolling up your sleeves and investing in yourself, in my experience, it's a short list. And the ones that you see who are kind of leading different organizations, or who are in sort of prominent positions in the market, who don't necessarily need a particular brand or organization to have market value, are the ones who understand that and work on themselves.
It's always very interesting when people talk about they talk about opportunity like somebody's supposed to just come and discover that, like, hey, you're what we need in this. And I tell people all the time, for performers who are not on a television show or are not part of an organization, if you've got a solid following, even on social media, those people are invested in you. Tell them stories, give them some character development. So I completely see what you're saying. And also, you are stepping out of the way, so you're no longer somebody's scapegoat for why they could not make it. Thom Latimer.
That's a very good point as well, because I saw some of that sentiment starting to kind of slip in with certain people who kind of thought that they were hot shit, and then didn't, and then sort of had an act that really only resonated for a handful of short-term sort of social media attention, or a sort of meme-worthy kind of act that maybe is fun the first couple of times, but then gets old really quick. And when they didn't pan out, first thing they did, point the finger at me. Oh, he didn't like me. He went out. Look, I don't need to like you. I just need to do business with you.
Strictly business. So one of the most compelling quotes that I've heard from you in recent memory, Thom Latimer is a Dollar Tree Nick Aldis. Expand.
That's what the kids call a sick burn.
Oh yeah,
I think
the kids.
Look, ultimately, the emotional situation. It's a real change of pace for me from what people have seen, because obviously I sort of led the brand to where it is by I felt like I was always the one who, my opponent was the one who was getting emotional, and I was able to sort of hold back some of that, because my whole thing was, hey, you have to beat me, right? And I'm the champion, and and I always felt like that was a compelling character to play, because it's like there's nothing to me, there's nothing that pushes people's buttons more than when you get emotional and the person who's making you emotional still doesn't get emotional, right? When they maintain that sort of ice in the veins kind of, what are you doing type of outlook. So I think it was a departure for a lot of people to see that from me. But Tom's legitimately my best friend. So when he sort of immediately sort of brought my son into it and essentially said, doesn't matter that you were the champion for over 1,000 days. Now you're not the champion, you're a loser. To me, that just didn't sit right, because that's sort of indicative, I think, of a lot of the culture that you see in social media today, where it's like, no one cares about all the good you've done. You do one bad thing, suddenly that's everything, right? That defines that you're as a whole person, because people will often use social media as a sort of way to distract themselves from really pushing for greatness of their own, because they can just sort of waste their time taking shots at other people. And I don't want Thom to be one of those people. But it was also my way of reminding him, like, if you want to get down in the gutter and trade, personal insults, I knew what would upset him worse than any bad language or vulgarity or sort of unnecessary personal jabs at sort of his past or anything like that. In my mind, I thought, what would really get to him and do more damage psychologically than anything else, and it would be to tell him that he's really just trying to be me, and because even though, who's to say how much I really believe or don't believe that, but the reality is that when someone's trying to present themselves as your equal, and is then trying to disparage you by saying you've lost your edge, or that you're a loser, you don't have it anymore, whatever it was he was trying to say, nothing cuts deeper than saying, well, if that's what I am, what does that make you when you're just a cheap version of me? Because regardless of, look, I don't really, I'm not going out of my way to make people like me. I've never been that guy, right? If people are cheering for me, great. If they're not, whatever. I tell the truth, and some people like that and some people don't. But when you're talking about the NWA, in the last 4 years, when you talk about the NWA, you're talking about Nick Aldis. So if you're operating in that oxygen, you're breathing my air, whether you like it or not. And just because I'm not the champion anymore, that doesn't change a thing about that.
And if the fact that you're not the champion makes you a loser, but he never was the champion, what does that say, right? I guess.
Well, exactly. You said that, not me. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, if the person that you're disparaging is suddenly a loser because they've lost something you never had to begin with,
without defeat, you can't appreciate victory.
Right. So I mean, it's
so
just
hopefully
tread lightly.
Hopefully after Saturday night, Thom will learn how to appreciate victory after he tastes bitter defeat.
So you also indicated that you, or insinuated, I don't know if it's what you really believe, it's what you just threw out there, but you insinuated that Camille, in the age-old fashion of best mates turning bitter rivals, that Camille is the factor that you feel has changed your dynamic in your relationship. Talk to me about that.
Anyone listening to this has probably at some point in their life had a close friend who now is either not their friend at all, or their relationship is less strong than it used to be. And the chances are it's because of one thing. Okay. So yes, relatable. And again, truth hurts, because nobody, not even Camille, nobody has gone out of their way more in their lives and careers to help Thom, to speak up for him when everybody had written him off, to constantly remind the powers that be, don't forget what you have here. Like, this guy I've said privately, you've got everything that I am here with this guy, but I've always felt like he was a better athlete, truthfully. I might have the edge on him on the mic, but as far as physical ability, he is, really, for my money, he's like in the top 1%. The only thing that held him back was his own internal beliefs. And I felt like I was doing a lot to sort of positively influence that. And then here comes Camille. And suddenly I should have had those things. It should have been me. I deserve all this. It's not fair. And just falling right into that sort of defeatist mentality that just doesn't work. Look, she's very fortunate because her experience in this business extends to being ringside for my world title matches. She learned a lot, but she didn't have to endure all the things that I endured. She didn't have to endure all the things that Thom endured, right? She kind of walked straight through an open door. So it doesn't surprise me that she's a little bit entitled, that she kind of thinks her shit doesn't stink. And again, I've been around long enough I had that mentality for a while, but the difference is that I had like the top guys in the industry there to put me in my place. I had Sting and Kurt Angle and AJ and Joe and, Doug Williams and Beer Money and all these different guys to put me in my place and be like, hey, slow down, kid. Like, so she was due a bit of a reality check. And I guess when I really think about it, it was always going to have to be me that gave it to her, because I was also the one that sort of brought her into this world, so to speak.
She's your Frankenstein monster. You created her. You have to.
Little bit.
So you think that she's ready for her come up, and she's got some dues to pay, and she's ready for that moment. Is Melina going to be the person to be able to do that at Hard Times too?
Well, I will tell you this: there's a huge gap in experience. You're gonna have to wake up really early in the morning to show Melina something she hasn't seen before. It really, that one's gonna, that to me looks like a classic case of sort of youth versus experience, physicality versus ring IQ. So we'll see what wins out. I can't speak for Melina because, I'm talking about her being Camille, being taught a lesson on
a personal level versus in the ring.
Right. For me, based on when she realizes that all this stuff she's feeding Thom is not helping him. It's going to hurt him in the long run. So as far as her and Melina goes, I won't take anything away from Camille, because all of those things that we just talked about with Frankenstein's monster, it doesn't change the fact that those things now exist. She is a phenom, and she does have a very high ring IQ for someone who has been around for a relatively short period of time. But again, that's because she was sitting under my learning tree.
Mm-hmm. You, on the most recent episode of Power, you were pretty emphatic that in the NWA, people should not walk in and demand and or receive a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship immediately. And yet at Hard Times 2, we see Mike Knox doing exactly that.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what your thoughts on that are, as well as whether or not you think that Mike Knox in 2021 rather, is somebody who is in a position to even do that. Does he have that ability to carry an NWA world title? Does he have the ability to carry the Hard Times 2 pay-per-view main event? Is he somebody who should even be challenging for this belt?
Well, you're right. I did say that, and I do stand by that, because I don't. I saw that all the way through my run. It was like you would get these guys who would some of them would have been released from WWE, or they had a sort of little comfort zone of a couple of independent promotions that they were doing well in, or they were bouncing around between sort of Impact, Ring of Honor, and a few other places, and their immediate sort of request when it came to coming to the NWA was a world title shot. And to me, it's just disrespectful, because you're essentially suggesting that there's no qualification process here. All the work that I put in, and Tim Storm and Cody and Marty and all these guys, that doesn't matter, so it would irritate me, because I would think these guys aren't serious. They're just thinking about themselves, and to be honest, to be world champion anywhere is a responsibility and a privilege, but to be the NWA champion, you're also sort of carrying this sort of vestige of history. And a lot of these guys, you could just tell they didn't really give a shit about Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. They didn't give a shit about Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair and Harley Race, and they don't. All they really care about is just having something to make a nice Instagram post about. What's something they can sell pictures with the belt at a few signings and make a few grand. So I always push back against that, but again, it's not my company. I just think it sets a very bad precedent for someone to just walk in on day one and have a title shot, because you're saying to everybody else, you're essentially kind of saying, oh, well, all the work you did doesn't really matter. What's the qualification process here? Just come in and attack the world champion.
Yeah.
So, but as far as Noxie goes, look, he's been around, and he's someone who I lobbied for a couple of times. It's like this guy got a lot more to offer than he's ever really been allowed to show. And I guess it was one of those things where sometimes the clock is ticking. So sort of, if you think you don't have a lot of time left to make an impression and make something happen, sometimes you sort of roll the dice and go for broke. And I think that's what happened here. So, hey, look, I wish him the best of luck. And for Trevor, it's like, it's hard. It's going to be hard for him to prepare for it and everything like that. But I'd be very surprised if with Trevor being so active and having really, Trevor is a perfect example of what I feel like the NWA, anyone who comes into the NWA should be striving to be like now, which is he came in with no expectations, wrestled whoever was put in front of him, earned his sort of upgrades up the card every time, to the point where it was, you could feel the people responding to him, and it was like, this guy is, this guy can go all the way. So he should be taking as much umbrage with this as I am. So, I hope that the right outcome happens on Saturday night.
One of the things I thought was very interesting about the card for Hard Times 2, it was recently just announced, your wife, Mickie James, is going to be defending her newly won Impact Knockouts World Women's Championship against Kiera Hogan. And not only is this unique in that this is a championship from another company being defended here, but the challenger is from a third company.
Right.
So I'm kind of particularly curious about how NWA has become the place that people can mix in this capacity.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's more about the fact that maybe, I don't know, maybe Billy's just a bit more secure. I'm not sure. But I think there's also, again, I don't like speaking for Billy, but I think that in our discussions, it was always, we were always sort of trying to remember that the NWA historically sort of wasn't an actual wrestling company. It was a sort of umbrella,
Alliance.
So I think there's still a little bit of that, where I think there's still a little bit of that sort of ideal, where it's sort of, it's like, like, you're the champion of one promotion, a challenger from another promotion, and they're going to wrestle each other, and the NWA, almost kind of takes the role of the host, because, I think that historically the NWA did fill that role a little bit. So I don't know, but I think it's just indicative of part of the new sort of age that we're in now, where matchups can happen and promotional boundaries are less important. So, and ultimately it's like, just as a purely from a promoter's point of view, if you have the opportunity to put a match like that on your pay-per-view card, you take it, and it's as simple as that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I love the idea, and I hope we get to see a little bit more of it in NWA, that it's the National Wrestling Alliance. People were affiliates of NWA, and with your tour, I know that Trevor is defending against Attila Khan, who is not part of the NWA roster proper, and we get Mickie and Kiera, and so my hope is that we may see more of that, where you get to see the end, what you did, which is quite heavily travel and defend against people who were not necessarily affiliated with the NWA, because it's an alliance of companies that promote professional wrestling.
Yeah, it all helps kind of contribute to the richer tapestry.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Nick, is there anything in closing that you want to say about NWA Hard Times 2, which is coming this weekend?
Well, we've discussed at length, my match. It's obviously it's a stark departure from what people may have been used to with me, as far as what they've seen from me on the NWA. But it's a stacked card. For me, my personal the thing I'm looking forward to the most is Doug Williams coming in and making his American debut for the NWA and returning to the US for the first time in 8 years. And he's taking on Colby Corino, who for me, I've sort of pointed out as I think was the best acquisition that the NWA made in 2021. So that's a match that I think is a real sleeper. But Austin Aries is coming back in, slightly controversial figure, but without question, an incredible in-ring performer. So
how did I miss that? Because I wasn't even aware of that, Nick. I did not know that.
Austin Aries is coming in. He's going to be wrestling Rhett Titus, because obviously now there's a lot of Ring of Honor talent who are now available and on the open market as well.
That is something I did want to ask you about. I'm glad you reminded me. We have seen that influx of Ring of Honor talent coming to NWA. Taven and Kanellis, or Taven and Bennett, not Kanellis. Sorry, Mike. Showed up and then promptly won the Ring of Honor World Tag Team titles like a week or so later. Talk to me a little bit about that working relationship that's developing there.
Well, it's been in effect since, before All In, where it started there and it continued after All In. So as far as, I did a lot with Ring of Honor. Obviously, the Crockett Cup was a co-promotion between the two. So there's always been it had not been as active recently, but obviously now you start to figure out why, because obviously they were having bigger problems. But we always felt that they had a very strong roster, and I always thought there was a fairly obvious kind of correlation between the two ethoses of the brands. There's a lot of guys who were really, who would constantly hit me up like, can you talk to them about bringing me in? I would love to come and work some of these NWA shows. Flip and I obviously have wrestled a few times, but Flip was so adamant about doing more with the NWA that he even tried to have it written into his Ring of Honor contract. So I think there's just a lot of those Ring of Honor guys just sort of were very excited about working with the NWA even before the new situation. So I think that it's just going to be a case of some guys might have to wait their turn because there's only so many spots on a card, but it's all about fresh matchups. Fresh matchups for the audience. Any promotion, needs to be careful not to exhaust, certain matchups and talent combinations. The key to sort of succeeding long term is to keep a sort of cycle of opponents for each other and make sure that. Hey, I'm not saying that stuff needs to change every week, because obviously sometimes if a certain rivalry or feud really kind of hits, it can last for a long time. But in the long run, there are all these matchups that people are now thinking about. Like, wouldn't it be great if this guy wrestled that guy or this girl wrestled that girl? And can you imagine if these two guys teamed up and took out these two guys? And it's all there for the taking. So it's just a case of timing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because right before, I hadn't written it down for us to have a conversation about, but it was something that was at the forefront of my mind, because I really, we saw that at your Kentucky pay-per-view. They appeared, and it was just such great competition for those in the NWA, and the talent. If we can get to see those kind of matchups, I think it's going to really excite a lot of viewers.
I think that the number one killer of any wrestling promotion is the comfort zone, right? When you get, every promotion has them, but you get those certain talent that just sort of feel like, I'm comfortable in this spot. Like, no one's going to take my spot away from me. I should always be on every show. I'm friends with the promoter. I'm friends with the boss. It's, they like me. I'm easy to deal with. That's just not how it works. It kills every promotion I've ever seen stone dead when you have people who aren't evolving and adapting and creating interest in what they're doing. If you're not sort of constantly reinventing and going back and tinkering with your stuff and improving it and striving to be better this week than you were last week, the comfort zone will kill you. And the NWA has to be very careful of that. And maybe this influx of Ring of Honor talent will help, sort of keep that mentality alive. Because one thing I'll say about, the difference between this where we're now and like season one, that in season one, besides me and Tim, it was everyone's first day. pretty much, so everyone was really striving. I'm going to make an impression. I'm going to show everybody like why I deserve to be here. I'm going to make the most of my minutes. And whereas now, there are already guys who I see where I'm like, your screen time isn't guaranteed. Like, make something of it. But for me, I don't think you should get too personal. Maybe I'm just a sociopath, but I don't like to get too attached to too many people for that reason when it comes to business. Because again, once you start getting personally attached and you start going, oh, well, I like so-and-so, they should be on the show because, well, I promised them. I said, hey, F all that, right? Like, are you making a difference? Yes or no?
Who's going to make it?
Because if you're not, someone else will come in and make a difference instead. And, that's how you end up with your true roster is are the ones who come in and go, sorry, you snooze, you lose. Like, I'm taking this spot.
Yeah. I mean, who's going to make the best show is really what it comes down to. Not who do I like the most, who is going to make the best show.
Right.
So, well, Nick, it's been a pleasure. It is an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm very much looking forward to this weekend's show. I really had hoped. I'd heard a rumor. This is just in closing because I wanted to confirm. I'd heard that there may be some situations where there's capacity limitations placed in the venues. Is that correct now?
Yeah, I think they're still working. They're still sort of working with GPB on that. I'm not really involved in that part of it, but I had heard that there may be.
Everything's
but that's the one thing about GPB because it's public. It's a public broadcasting place that they're beholden to quite a lot of regulations and stuff like that. So, like I said, I can't say anything definitively because I don't know, but I don't think it's affecting anyone who's bought a ticket. Let's put it this way. But it may affect how many more tickets get put out. I'm not sure.
So the key here, folks, get the tickets quickly. There's only a handful left. It is NWA Hard Times 2 coming this weekend on Fight TV pay-per-view. So jump in, and best of luck to you taking on your best friend. Best of luck to your wife, who I adore for obvious reasons. And I hope to talk to you and everybody else at NWA very soon. Thank you, Nick.
Absolutely. Thank you.